Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Story Hub. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. At 36, I was married to my gorgeous wife, and we'd been together for 8 years. Rachel, who's 34, could easily pass for 28. We never had children, though I was ready to be a dad. Every time I brought it up, she'd say, "Soon, James, soon." Our intimate life was fantastic, but for me, it was the little things that mattered, the kisses, the cuddles. I always felt at peace when I had her in my arms, like all was right in the world. Rachel was everything I could ask for, loving, attentive, and always by my side. I was genuinely content, convinced she was just as happy. But my biggest mistake was putting so much trust in her. Her name is Rachel. My deep love for her eventually twisted into an intense, bitter hatred, which then hardened into a cold, hollow emptiness. People say the opposite of love is indifference, but that wasn't the case for me. What I felt turned into a quiet, chilling rage that gnawed at my soul. I'm not sure I'll ever heal from it. If I saw her engulfed in flames, I'd sit back with a drink and watch, without even considering dousing the fire. I bet you're wondering what could turn a once kind, loving man into someone so full of vengeance. Well, it all began at last year's company holiday party. Rachel had a habit of dressing far too provocatively for these events. I wasn't usually bothered when she dressed that way. After all, the attention she got from other men made me proud. It was flattering knowing that the most stunning woman in the room was mine. But that night, she wore a dress that left almost nothing to the imagination. I couldn't help but wonder who she was really trying to impress. I'm typically not the jealous type, but I've always believed that what's mine is mine. As long as there was no doubt about that, I was fine. Before we left, I told Rachel straight up that she'd likely get hit on by a lot of men, but I trusted her to keep things respectful, for both her and me. I'm not the kind of man who puts up with disrespect. My martial arts buddies nicknamed me the Crusher, and they all know I can be a ruthless son of a bitch when needed. Rachel had never seen that side of me, and I hoped she never would. But before we even stepped out the door, I had this unsettling feeling, almost like a premonition. "Why do you look like you've lost your best friend, James? Don't you want to go to the party?" she teased, giving me that seductive smile that always got a reaction out of me. "To be honest, babe, I'd rather skip it this year," I said, hoping she might agree. "Why, honey? You've always enjoyed these parties," she replied as she pulled on a pair of sheer black stockings. "Don't be such a buzzkill. We hardly ever go out dancing anymore, and I really need a night to let loose and have some fun. I'm almost ready. Come on, let's get going." Her tone had a hint of annoyance at my hesitation. Something felt off. She seemed way too eager about this party. It's just that last year things got a little out of hand. There was a lot of inappropriate touching going on. People start drinking and acting like idiots. I'm not a fan of big, rowdy crowds, I explained. Ever since Brandon Peterson got promoted to vice president, he's been chasing every woman in the office. There's even a rumor he's hooked up with a few of them. I almost knocked him flat last year. I hated how he was constantly hovering around Rachel, and I definitely didn't appreciate the way he danced with her. Brandon's the president's nephew, a slimy little weasel who thinks the world revolves around him. He's married with 2 kids, but I've always felt sorry for his wife. She deserves a better man than that jerk. At past parties, I've noticed how he shamelessly flirts with other women, making his wife look like a fool. She stopped attending these events altogether over the last couple of years. She's a classy, attractive woman, and I can't figure out why she's stuck around with that smug clown. He's just a big flirt, honey. I know how to handle guys like him. And don't ever forget, I'm proud to be your woman. I love you more than anything, you know that, right? You've got nothing to worry about. Sure, He's tall, rich, and good-looking, but he'll never measure up to the kind of man you are. You're my one and only, and that's never going to change." Her description of that creep didn't sit well with me, but I brushed it off. Rachel had never given me a reason to question her loyalty before. Love can be blinding like that. Deep down, I knew there was no swaying her mind was made up. Sometimes, as a husband, you have to give a little to keep the peace and win in the long run. I didn't want anything getting in the way of my plan to make wild, passionate love with her once we got back home. We showed up to the party a bit late, and a few folks were already tipsy. Music was blasting, people were dancing, laughing, and letting loose. I figured I'd do my best to blend in and hope the night would wrap up sooner rather than later. No sooner had we walked through the door than Brandon Peterson sauntered over. He offered me a limp handshake that felt like shaking hands with a snake. Without even acknowledging me, he locked eyes with Rachel and kissed her hand slowly, as if I wasn't even there. I felt the blood pounding in my ears. It wouldn't have taken much more for me to knock him flat right then and there. I could already tell it was going to be a rough night. Rachel gave me a quick wink, as if to reassure me everything was fine, and we started mingling with the guests. Not long after, Brandon came back and hooked his arm around Rachel's. She didn't pull away. I could feel my patience fraying. "Let me introduce you to some of our new team members," he said with a grin that made my skin crawl. He was acting like Rachel belonged to him. "You don't mind, do you, James?" He didn't wait for me to respond before leading her off. Rachel shot me a look that begged me to stay calm, so I bit my tongue and let it go. Thankfully, a buddy of mine, David, noticed what was going on and dragged me over to join a group of guys playing a drinking game and spinning tall tales, while their wives gossiped about who knows what. I pretended to sip my drink, but I never get drunk, I prefer to keep my head clear. While chatting with my friends, I kept an eye out for Rachel every now and then. I noticed her dancing with a couple of different guys, but everything seemed innocent enough. I lost track of time after a while, but I knew one thing for sure, I was ready to head home and have my way with my wife. We hadn't been together for a few days, which was unusual for us. I was glad Rachel had the chance to blow off some steam, just like she'd wanted. I'd done my part by coming along, and now I was more than ready to leave. But when I started looking for her, she was nowhere in sight. I couldn't imagine where she might have gone. I spotted her friend Natalie and asked if she'd seen Rachel around. Natalie looked a bit flustered and said she saw Rachel dancing with Brandon about 20 minutes ago. A chill ran down my spine, and that gnawing feeling I'd had all night twisted my stomach into a knot. I decided to search for her outside the main ballroom. I heard voices as I passed by a small, unused conference room. Something told me I needed to check it out. As I got closer, I could hear a woman's moans, filled with passion. It sounded just like Rachel. My heart dropped into my stomach. I peeked inside, and what I saw made me feel like I was having a stroke. There was my loving wife, bent over the arm of a chair, while that slimy bastard Brandon was having his way with her. For a moment, I was completely frozen, like I was rooted to the spot. They were too caught up in what they were doing to even notice I was standing there. I walked closer, standing just a few feet away, watching in shock before they finally realized they had an audience. "Oh my God, James, please let me explain." Rachel cried out, desperately trying to fix her appearance. "You've got nothing to say to me, you deceitful witch," I spat back, my voice dripping with venom. "I worshipped the ground you walked on, and this is the thanks I get. We're done. You're no longer my wife. Look at me." She couldn't bring herself to meet my eyes, so I grabbed her hair and forced her to look up. "What do you see? Do you see the eyes of a man who once loved you? No, these are the eyes of a dead man. You killed my heart and soul tonight. Now I understand why you were so eager to come to this damn party. You wouldn't be intimate with me because you were saving yourself for this scumbag," I said, watching as she broke down into a wailing cry. "No, Please, let me explain, she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't even try to talk your way out of this. You've been caught, I snapped. She looked terrified, opening her mouth to speak but unable to get a word out. As I berated my unfaithful wife, Brandon stood there smirking, clearly entertained. Just then, 3 of my friends, David, Tyler, and Adam, walked into the room. I guessed Natalie had warned them there might be trouble. They stopped in their tracks, stunned by the scene unfolding before them. Nobody said a word. I turned my gaze to Brandon. And you piece of trash. I should end you right here. If you lay a hand on me, they'll have you arrested for assault, and my uncle will fire you. Hell, he might even kick your ass just for the fun of it. Besides, I've already had your precious wife more than once, Brandon sneered at me. You've been enjoying sloppy seconds after every holiday party for the past 5 years. His grin was infuriating. To hell with you and your uncle, I growled, deciding then and there that I was going to humiliate him and make him suffer, along with Rachel. He was a few inches taller than me, but that didn't bother me. He had no idea what kind of trouble he was in. I let my anger dull the sting of my heartbreak as I stared at the woman I would have died for. We both knew what she had done was unforgivable. There was no coming back from this, no excuses, no chance of forgiveness. Our marriage was shattered beyond repair. As much as I wanted to end him right there, I knew she wasn't worth spending the next 25 years behind bars. You're mine now, and you're going to pay for disrespecting me, I said, locking eyes with him. He didn't expect me to act so calm and controlled. I deliberately blocked his path, watching the uncertainty flicker across his face. He tried to shove past me, and that was his big mistake. I easily dodged his hand and delivered a swift punch to his gut. As he doubled over, I grabbed him by the neck and started slapping him, hard and fast. The first slap left him stunned, and he crumpled to the floor. I lost count of how many times I smacked the whimpering idiot. All right, please stop. No more, I'm begging you, he cried out, sounding like the coward he was. This isn't nearly enough, you lowlife. You're going to regret ever messing with my wife. You stole what was mine. By the time I'm through, you'll be divorced and disgraced. I'm suing you for alienation of affection, and I'm taking legal action against the company for your misconduct during work hours. You think you're untouchable, but you picked the wrong man to mess with. Mark my words, you've made a colossal mistake. My voice was cold and full of menace. Just then, 2 police officers burst into the room. I glanced over at Rachel. Don't think I've forgotten about you. You threw away a good man for this sniveling piece of trash. You two deserve each other. He attacked me. Arrest him, he's out of his mind. Brandon screamed at the cops. The officers seemed to grasp the situation immediately. It was self-defense, officer, David spoke up. James caught him in the act with his wife. Is that true? The cop asked Tyler and Adam. Absolutely, officer, Tyler confirmed. James was only defending himself, Adam added. They're lying. He assaulted me. Brandon wailed, his voice almost hysterical. One of the cops turned to Rachel, who looked like she was in shock, her lips moving but no words coming out. Ma'am, are you okay? Did you see what happened? One officer asked her. Rachel just sat there sobbing, her face buried in her hands. I felt nothing but emptiness where my love for her used to be. Do you want to press charges against him? The sergeant asked, pointing at Brandon. It was clear the officers sympathized with me, despite Brandon's swollen, bruised face. He attacked me. He's insane, I tell you. I didn't do anything. Brandon kept pleading. That's not what our 3 witnesses say, the second officer replied. Lock him up, officer. I'd be glad to press charges. Get him out of here, the sergeant said, glancing at me with a look of understanding. If you need anything else, just give the station a call and ask for Officer Harris. Trust me, I've been where you are. I gave him a silent nod, appreciating his empathy without needing to say a word. We'll catch up later, James, David said. Come on, guys, let's give him some space. He's got things to handle. David stepped closer, looking me square in the eyes before pulling me into a firm hug. Stay strong, he whispered, then turned and left the room. Now it was just the two of us. I grabbed her panties off the chair and stuffed them into my pocket, not really knowing why or what I planned to do with them. Rachel had stopped crying by then, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew what was coming next, and so did I. A cold numbness swept over me, like something deep inside had shattered. I felt strangely detached from the woman I once adored. It was as if I didn't recognize myself anymore. I glanced at Rachel and thought of that old saying, she looked like she'd been ridden hard and put away wet. How do you erase someone you've loved so deeply from your heart? I didn't have an answer for that. What I did know was that I could never see her the same way again. I clung to my anger, it was the only thing keeping my sorrow at bay and holding my sanity together. Right then, my mind clicked into place with a plan for revenge. The wound she inflicted on me would never heal, it would haunt me for the rest of my life. She had shattered my entire world. The trust was gone, and nothing else mattered anymore. Grab your coat and meet me at the car. Be quick about it, I ordered, turning my back on her. I didn't want her to see the raw pain etched on my face. I wasn't interested in her pity. This was the beginning of the funeral for our love and our marriage. As I drove off into the night, the silence between us spoke louder than any words could. Are we heading home, James? She asked tentatively. We don't have a home anymore. The moment you broke our vows, you destroyed our home. It's just a house now, a place where I used to be happy, where I once loved and trusted a wife who was my best friend, I said, unable to hide the sadness in my voice. She started sobbing softly. James, please, is there any way you can forgive me? I'll do anything, just give me another chance. I'm so sorry, I truly am, she whispered, her voice cracking. Do you really think I can ever forget what I saw tonight? Or that bastard bragging about how he'd been with you? You didn't just cheat on me, you slept with my enemy. You chose to break your vows and give him what was mine, time and time again. You ended our marriage the moment you did that. It means the last 5 years of my life have been nothing but a lie. Please forgive me, James. I swear, I love you with all my heart. I let him use me because I craved the thrill of doing something forbidden. I didn't think about the consequences, it felt like a game, a stupid, reckless game. He could never compare to you. I know I've been foolish and selfish, but let me make it up to you. Please, punish me, yell at me, anything, just don't leave me. I can't live without you. It didn't mean anything, she pleaded. It meant everything. I shouted, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I felt my emotions spiraling out of control, but I forced myself to calm down. A game? You call messing with my life a game? You say you love me, yet you go and sleep with another man? I slowed the car to a stop. Get out, I said flatly. Where are we? Get out, I repeated. Why? What's happening? Her face twisted with fear and confusion. Get out of the car. Now, I commanded, leaving no room for argument. She hesitated but followed me to the door. Mrs. Warren, right? How can I help you? The woman asked as she opened the door. My name is James Mitchell. I used to work for your husband's company. I'd like to speak with you for a moment. Is Brandon okay? What's this about? She asked, her concern evident. I kept a firm grip on Rachel's arm as we stepped inside. Please, come in and have a seat, I said. She was the kind of wife I thought I had, graceful, loyal, everything I believed Rachel to be. What I was about to do would cause her pain, but it was necessary to destroy Brandon completely. He should have known better than to mess with me. I needed to hurt his innocent wife to get to him, to humiliate both him and my soon-to-be ex-wife. I was running on raw, primal instincts I couldn't even begin to explain. "This won't take long, Mrs. Warren," I said calmly. "My wife has something she needs to tell you." All eyes turned to Rachel. I tightened my grip on her arm. "Go on, tell her," I insisted. She hesitated for a moment, then I squeezed her arm even harder. "Tell her," I repeated. "My husband caught me having sex with Brandon tonight at the holiday party," she blurted out, her words dripping with shame. "Now tell her how long you've been screwing her husband," I demanded. "For the past 5 years, we've managed to sneak away and have sex every holiday season," she sobbed. "I behaved like a slut, and I'm so sorry. But who knew if that was the full truth? For all I knew, she could have had multiple lovers or been seeing Brandon far more frequently than she admitted. It didn't matter anymore. Her ability to lie and deceive me for years was already well established." Brandon's wife looked less shocked and more furious. She always knew her husband was a scumbag, but hearing the confession out loud made her legs buckle. She steadied herself, then marched over to Rachel and slapped her across the face, hard. Rachel stumbled back, clutching her cheek, stunned and hurt. "Get that whore out of my house," she spat. "When I'm done divorcing that worthless bastard, you can keep him," she sneered, looking at Rachel like she was nothing more than roadkill. A part of me felt satisfied knowing that Brandon was in for a nasty surprise when he got out of jail. As for Rachel and me, it was clear our time together was finished. It pained me to look at her. I never imagined there would come a day when my once beloved wife would need my protection, and I'd refuse to give it. But here we were. Sometimes life takes unexpected, ugly turns. As we got closer to her sister's place, I finally spoke. "We're getting a divorce," I said, not even glancing in her direction. "The house will be sold, and I'm taking 70% of the equity. We'll split our investments, and we keep our own pensions. If you agree not to contest the divorce, I won't list adultery as a reason. That means I won't call on the dozen witnesses who knew what you were up to over the past 5 years. And I'm sure my 3 friends who saw me beat the hell out of your lover would be more than happy to help bury you. If you fight me on this, I'll send a detailed transcript to every friend and family member you have, letting them all know exactly what kind of person you are. It's your choice. There's nothing I can say or do, James." "Nothing," she whispered, sounding defeated and broken. "You already know the answer, don't you?" I said coldly. "My revenge against you is going to last a long time, maybe for the rest of your life." "What are you going to do to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I know you. You're a good man deep down, and I believe you still love me. I know I've caused immense pain, but can't we find a way to move past this? For the most part, you were a good wife, but your selfishness destroyed everything. You've been manipulative and self-centered, and I chose to ignore that side of you for years. I won't make that mistake again. Your guilt will consume you. When you finally realize I'm never coming back, you'll feel an unbearable sense of loss. You'll crave my forgiveness, but you've forfeited my love forever. I hope you go to your grave with the weight of that regret on your shoulders, knowing you are unforgiven." We pulled up in front of her sister's house. "You'll hear from my lawyer soon," I told her flatly. "Don't go back to our house until tomorrow afternoon. By then, I'll be gone. I'll come back later to collect the rest of my things when you're not there." "That's it, James. After 8 years of marriage, it all ends just like that?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Just like that. Goodbye." I reached into my pocket and tossed her panties back at her. "And take these with you." She stepped out of the car with tears streaming down her face. Mine weren't far behind. The divorce was finalized in 6 months. Now, 8 months later, I often wonder if I should have let her see the pain I felt that night, if only to show her how deeply her actions shattered my world. Looking back, I realize I lost control that night. It's not something I'm proud of. Maybe I was half mad in that moment. Ever since then, I've tried to suppress the grief of our failed marriage, to keep the anguish at a distance. Yet the sadness lingers. It's a constant companion, gnawing at me. My subconscious keeps asking questions for which there are no answers. For the first 6 months after we split up, she kept trying to call me. If she left a voicemail, I'd delete it without listening. If I answered and heard her voice, I'd hang up immediately. It was a way of protecting myself. Despite everything I knew, part of me still loved her. She had a way of getting under my skin, and I couldn't afford to let her do that anymore. My dignity, self-respect, and pride depended on me staying strong. I couldn't allow her the chance to hurt me again. The more I shut her out, the more exposed I felt. My love for her hadn't completely faded, but I knew I couldn't be with her anymore. Once the divorce was finalized, she stopped trying to contact me. What could she even say? I love you, it was just sex, honey. I'm a sex addict. He drugged me and forced me for 4 years straight. I didn't want to listen to any of her excuses or lies. Even if it had only happened once and she didn't tell me, she was complicit in his actions. And from what I saw, it was obvious she wasn't exactly resisting his advances. She signed the divorce papers and didn't bother showing up for the final hearing. Honestly, it was better that way. I had no desire to see her again. Whether her absence meant she was too hurt to face me or she simply didn't care anymore, I couldn't say. I used to think I knew her inside and out, but after what I witnessed, I realized anything was possible. Images of her tear-streaked, defeated face from the last time I saw her are still burned into my memory. Oddly enough, that image grew sharper over time, while the scene of her with Brandon started to blur. Even though I knew our love was a sham, I still found myself missing her. God help me, but I could never bring myself to trust her again. I'd never know if she truly loved me or if I was just a pawn in some twisted game. Was she already like this when I married her? I couldn't wrap my head around why she thought it was okay to make a fool out of me. If she really loved me, how could she disrespect me like that? The questions gnawed at me, leaving me feeling confused and inadequate. I started to doubt if I could ever trust another woman again. I knew I needed to do something to get her out of my head, but I had no idea where to start. My so-called revenge was more of a fantasy. It depended on her feeling the same kind of love for me that I once had for her. For all I knew, she could have been jumping into bed with someone new the minute I was out of sight. I hated the thought of being the only one suffering. The harsh reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I never really knew her. I'd fallen in love with a mirage. Was it all just smoke and mirrors? These questions were driving me mad. The death of our marriage felt like a sudden lightning strike. There was no warning. In one night, the life I knew was completely shattered. When people heard about what happened, some of our friends painted me as a heartless villain. Others thought I should have done more to punish and humiliate her. None of that mattered to me anymore. The rage had left me, replaced by a feeling of emptiness. I didn't want to dwell on the past, and I had no vision for the future. The president of the company offered me $800,000 in hush money, on the condition that I keep the company's name and his nephew out of the spotlight. He even tried to offer me Brandon's position as vice president. But there was no way I could stay on. I couldn't stand the thought of facing my old colleagues. Their looks said it all. Some pitied me, others saw me as a fool for letting my wife betray me for so long. To them, I was either a victim or a clueless idiot. It seemed like everyone knew what was going on with Rachel and Brandon, everyone except me. With the $200,000 I got from Brandon to avoid a lawsuit for alienation of affection, my share of the house equity, and the split of our investments, I decided I didn't need to find work anytime soon. I started drinking every day, trying to drown out the lonely hours and the empty feeling that gnawed at me. One night, while nursing my drink at my favorite bar, I struck up a conversation with the bartender. His name was Sam, a guy in his 50s with a head of gray hair and a face that looked like it had seen its fair share of rough times. Sam was a no-nonsense kind of guy, which is why I liked him. His eyes carried the kind of wisdom you only get from a lifetime of hard knocks. He was the kind of man you'd want on your side in a bar fight. He'd seen it all and done it all. "Michael, I've never seen you drink this heavily before. I'm getting a little worried about you, buddy. You're on your third scotch, and you've only been here for 15 minutes. I hope you don't mind me stepping in, but you look like a man with a lot weighing on his mind. It's a slow night, and I've been behind this bar long enough to know when someone needs a good listener. If you want to talk, I'm here," Sam said. It felt like a relief to finally have someone to share it with. I'd been having too many conversations in my own head lately. Sam just listened as I spilled the whole story. He stayed quiet for a long while after I finished. "Your ex was in here a couple of weeks ago, James," Sam finally said. "She looked as gorgeous as ever. Didn't seem like she was grieving to me. She kept glancing around the room, much like you are now. Maybe she was looking for you. I don't doubt she probably loves you, in her own twisted way. But don't bother trying to make sense of it. She came in with an older guy, one of those types who acts like he's royalty. You could tell he was wealthy and used to getting what he wants. She didn't look particularly happy, but she wasn't exactly miserable either. Meanwhile, here you are, crying into your drink while she's out dancing." A vivid image of Rachel flashed in my mind. I could picture her perfectly, hear her laugh, smell her familiar perfume. It wasn't the broken, sobbing woman I had left behind. Instead, it was the seductive, manipulative force of nature she had always been. So much for my grand plans of revenge. I couldn't help but wonder if she'd felt even a fraction of the pain and heartbreak that's haunted me since we parted ways. I just sat there, staring down at my glass, lost in a whirlwind of grief. It was a wave I couldn't hold back anymore, and I was grateful Sam was there beside me. The sorrow for what I had lost overwhelmed me. "Now, what I'm about to say might come off a bit harsh," Sam continued, "but you need to pull yourself together, James. Your situation has changed, and you've got to change with it. That's the bottom line. It's time to grow up, get your body back in shape, and move forward. On your feet, soldier, march or die. The answers to your problems aren't in this bottle. You're stuck right now, and if you don't snap out of it, you'll end up trapped here forever, hiding in your booze. You're dangerously close to losing your self-respect, and if you let that happen, there's no one to blame but yourself. First things first, go find a woman, have some wild, no-strings-attached sex, and do it again. You're too big a man to let that woman drag you down. Find someone, let loose, and get your head straight. Then move on with your life," Sam said, his voice a blend of a friend, a counselor, and a no-nonsense drill sergeant. I was embarrassed by how far I'd let myself fall, but I took Sam's advice to heart. I quit drinking, started hitting the gym again, and went out with every woman who was willing. It wasn't about love, I could barely remember most of their names. These casual flings weren't about connection, they were just for fun, a way for me to rebuild my confidence. They were my life preservers, keeping me afloat when I felt like I was drowning. But it wasn't enough. I realized I craved something deeper, I wanted to feel loved. As I got back into shape and my confidence returned, I noticed I was attracting more attention from women. It finally dawned on me, I wasn't the cause of Rachel's behavior. If anything, I should have confronted her selfish, manipulative tendencies years ago. Whatever inner demons she battled were her own, not something I created. Once I accepted that, the fog of depression began to lift. I knew I needed a fresh start, far away from her and all the memories. I bought a motorcycle, sold most of my belongings, and hit the road, heading south with no map and no real destination. It didn't matter where I was going, every road leads somewhere. As soon as I climbed onto that bike, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. It had been a while since I last rode, but before I'd even left the state, I felt in perfect sync with the bike and the road. I was no longer a white-collar drone or a miserable drunk. I felt like a modern-day cowboy, with the bike as my horse, strong, sleek, and powerful, yet dangerous if not handled with care. It was a beautiful machine that could easily kill its rider if he lost control. I felt like a true biker, with the road ahead of me more significant than anything I left behind. I was in full control of my life, guiding the bike with a steady hand. My safety was my responsibility, and I loved the sense of freedom that came with it. These thoughts became part of my new outlook on life as I rode. I could feel the rhythm of the world around me, the subtle changes in temperature as I passed through hills and valleys, the scenery blurring by in a beautiful haze. It felt incredible just to be alive. I even found myself hoping there might be motorcycles in heaven. If that were the case, dying wouldn't seem so scary. In those moments, I was completely present. The past and future didn't matter anymore. Each mile I rode brought me a little closer to inner peace. The roar of the big twin engine and the wind whipping around me were like a soothing song for my soul. I traveled through countless small towns with odd names, met a lot of interesting folks, and ate my fair share of greasy diner food. Some roads were smooth, others were rough, that's just life, I suppose. Eventually, I veered west, right outside Amarillo, Texas. That's when I noticed a woman frantically waving me down on the side of the road. I pulled over and waited for her to catch up, wondering what she was doing out there all alone. She was about average height, with blonde hair, and even though she was crying and looked like she'd been roughed up, she was quite pretty. "Please, please help me," she sobbed. Even with her tear-streaked face, her green eyes were captivating, like inviting pools of warm water. "Sure, how can I help?" I asked, turning off the bike and stepping closer, unsure of what I was getting myself into. "I need a ride to Dallas," she said urgently. "My ex-boyfriend is heading to my house right now. He said he's going to kill my mother and my daughter. Do you have a phone I can use?" I wanted to ask her what was going on, but she was clearly in a state of panic. There wasn't time for questions. I handed her my phone, and she called the police. After speaking with them, she seemed a bit calmer. "You don't know me, and I hate to ask, but could you give me a ride to my house? The police will meet us there. I'm praying that lunatic doesn't get there before they do. Please, we need to hurry," she pleaded. Before I could even respond, she climbed onto the back of the bike and wrapped her arms around me tightly. We took off down the road, and I pushed the bike to its limits, using every bit of skill I had to get her home fast. I'm pretty sure I broke every traffic law in the book, but it felt good to have someone hold on to me like that. It felt good to be needed. I didn't even know her name, and I had no idea what we'd face when we got there. If her ex had a gun, we'd both be in deep trouble. When we pulled up to her house, the police were already on the scene, handcuffing a man who was resisting arrest. The woman leapt off the bike and sprinted toward the house. The guy caught sight of her and started shouting, "I'll get you, just wait. They can't keep me locked up forever." He kept ranting as the officers dragged him away. "Mama, are you and Emma okay?" I was so scared, she cried, hugging her mother tightly. Just then, a sweet little girl who looked about 8 years old peeked out from behind the door. "Mommy, you're home. Michael was here. He said he was going to kill us." "Why does he want to hurt me and Grandma?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion and fear. I stood there, feeling a bit awkward, not sure if I should stay or go. Both the mother and the grandmother finally noticed me standing by the bike. "I'm so sorry," the woman said, wiping her tears. "I didn't even ask your name." "James Mitchell," I replied, extending my hand. "And what's yours?" "I'm Laura," she said, shaking my hand. "This is my mother, Betty, and my little angel, Emma. It's a pleasure to meet all of you, especially you, Emma, I said with a smile, looking down at the little girl. I'm just glad I could help out. Please, call me James. Mr. Mitchell is my dad, I added with a grin. I wish we could have met under better circumstances, Laura said, glancing back toward the road. But I'm grateful they got him before he could hurt anyone. He was acting completely deranged. Before she could say more, Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. Can I go for a ride on your motorcycle, please? I like motorcycles, she asked, looking up at her mom with hopeful eyes. Emma seemed to have completely forgotten the chaos caused by her mother's ex-boyfriend, blissfully unaware of the serious danger they had just escaped. We'll see, Emma, I said, smiling. If it's okay with your mom, it's okay with me. Betty extended her hand for a handshake. As we shook hands, she said, we really appreciate your help, James. Would you care to stay for dinner? I feel like we owe you at least an explanation for everything you've done. I'd love to stay, Betty. It's been a long time since I've had a home-cooked meal. Well, I hope you brought your appetite. Mama always cooks way too much, Laura added with a playful sparkle in her eye. Are you married? Emma suddenly asked. No, sweetheart, I'm not married, I replied, kneeling down to meet her gaze. Why, are you thinking of marrying me? She pondered this seriously for a moment before saying, I'm too little, but you could marry mommy. Her innocent suggestion made us all smile, feeling a bit sheepish at her boldness. Emma, we just met James, Laura said gently, in that patient tone only a mother has. He doesn't even know us yet. I know, but he has a motorcycle, and I like him. Emma declared. Well, now that we've got that settled, let's eat, Betty chimed in, leading us to the table. Even though I had just met this family, it felt like I was sitting down with old friends. There was a warmth and sincerity about them that tugged at something deep inside me. Their kindness, along with the trouble they were facing, awakened my protective instincts. I could sense good energy among them. I needed to know more about Michael, the ex-boyfriend. He seemed dangerously unstable, and I was genuinely concerned for their safety. It didn't hurt that Laura was strikingly beautiful, and little Emma was absolutely endearing. I silently vowed that as long as I was around, no harm would come to them. Suddenly, it felt like I had a purpose again. I couldn't help but wonder how such a good woman like Laura ended up with a guy like Michael. Then I thought back to Rachel. One bad choice can lead to a cascade of painful consequences. Fate can be both cruel and kind, I realized. I felt lucky to have crossed paths with Laura. Life had clearly thrown her around a bit, and I knew exactly what that felt like. When the moment was right, I planned to dig deeper into Michael's story. He was going to be a problem, I could feel it. We sat down to dinner, and I could tell that both Laura and her mother were pleased to see how hungry I was. The meal was delicious, and I ate like a man who hadn't had a good meal in ages. As we chatted, I shared a bit about my past, my divorce and how I'd been riding aimlessly for months, trying to piece my life back together. They listened with empathy, nodding as I spoke. I felt a genuine connection with them, and it seemed like the feeling was mutual. I noticed both Laura and Betty stealing subtle, curious glances at me, as if they were trying to figure out what kind of man I was. Emma, on the other hand, had already made up her mind. She sat next to me, reaching out every now and then to touch my arm. It made me smile, both on the outside and deep in my heart. Turning to Laura, I asked, how did you end up involved with someone like Michael? I don't like Michael, Emma piped up, her voice serious. He's a mean man, and he hurt mommy. Laura's expression turned somber, a mix of pain and embarrassment as she realized how much her daughter had witnessed. At first, Michael seemed thoughtful and kind, Laura began quietly. I didn't love him, but he was decent company in the beginning. I was lonely, and it felt good to have someone to talk to. But it didn't take long for him to change. He started drinking heavily, became controlling, and didn't want me talking to my friends or family. Then he started treating Emma like she was a nuisance, something he couldn't be bothered with. I refused to tolerate that kind of abuse. When I told him it was over, he became violent. He promised if I spoke with him one last time, he'd leave us alone. That's how I ended up standing on the side of the road today. Thank God you came along when you did. When did all this start? Is Michael Emma's father? I asked, praying I was wrong. No, Emma's father was my husband, Eric. He was killed in Afghanistan. It's just been me and Emma ever since. That was over 3 years ago. I only met Michael about a month ago. That's how we ended up in this mess. I'd suggest going down to the courthouse on Monday to file for an order of protection, I said. He threatened you right in front of the police. They'll grant it automatically, and if he even comes close to you or your family, they'll arrest him on the spot. I want to ride the motorcycle. Emma suddenly shouted, breaking the tension in a way only a child can. Okay, I'm sure James will take you for a ride, Laura laughed. But first, why don't you go watch some cartoons? I want to chat with James a bit longer, okay, sweetheart. Come on, sugar, Betty said, taking her by the hand. Let's go see what's on TV. Okay, Mommy. See you later, James. Emma said, skipping off happily. Your daughter is amazing, I said, smiling. She's something special. She really is. I think she looks like you, in a way. Emma is my little angel. If anything ever happened to her, I don't think I'd survive. She's been my rock these past few years. I get it, I replied, instinctively taking her hands in mine. It felt like the most natural thing to do. In that moment, something magical happened. I swear, the warmth from her hands shot straight up my arm, stirred up my thoughts, and landed squarely in my heart. I realized I wanted this woman, badly. I was lost in her eyes, and for a few seconds, we didn't need words. I could tell she felt it too. It was intense, and it scared me a little. It's getting late, I said, standing up abruptly. I should find a place to crash for the night. I felt a rush of nerves, like my life was shifting in real time, and I was just trying to keep pace. We have plenty of room here, James, she said softly. Stay with us. Emma would love it if you did. Really? And what about you? I asked, already knowing what her answer would be. Yes, I'd like that too. I feel safe when you're around. You're like a knight in shining armor, riding in to save me on your motorcycle. We'd be happy to have you here until you get back on your feet, she said with a smile that lit up the whole room. It was obvious she thought I was broke. Clearly, it wasn't my money she was after. I accept, I said, grinning. And I noticed your house could use a few fixes. I'd be glad to help out. That would be wonderful, James, Laura replied. It'll be nice having you around for a bit. It's Saturday night, do you know of any good spots for dancing? Nothing fancy, though. I didn't exactly bring a lot of clothes when we left. I know just the place, I said, smiling back. She looked me up and down, trying to gauge my size. My husband, Eric, was about your build, she said thoughtfully. I never could bring myself to get rid of his clothes. I'll show you where they are. If anything fits, you're welcome to it. I need to get myself ready, but I'll show you to the guest room first. There's a bathroom in there if you want to take a quick shower. It's a country bar, so don't worry about dressing up too much. She disappeared for a while, then came back an hour later. Holy hell, I said when she walked in. Laura had transformed. She wore a pair of well-fitted jeans, high heels, and a snug top that highlighted her figure. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and a strand of pearls graced her neck. She looked stunning, young, yet sophisticated, and so effortlessly beautiful that it took my breath away. You look absolutely incredible, I said, unable to hide the goofy smile on my face. I'm just a simple country girl, she replied coyly, a hint of a blush on her cheeks. If that's the case, then I'm a big fan of the country, I said, feeling the urge to kiss her right then and there. She beamed at the compliment, and in that moment, I felt like I'd hit the jackpot. I couldn't help but wonder how she'd handle all the male attention she was sure to attract tonight. The club was much bigger than I expected. Heads turned as we walked in, all eyes on Laura. She carried herself like she had no idea how stunning she looked. The band had the crowd moving, dancing, nodding along to the beat, and sharing smiles and laughter. Laura took the lead, teaching me how to two-step and a few other country dances. I was having a blast and realized I actually liked country music a lot more than I thought. Whenever a slow song played, I pulled her close, savoring every moment. It felt like she was meant to be with me, and I hoped she felt the same way. After a while, we sat down to rest, sipping on a beer and talking. She turned down every offer to dance from other men, politely but firmly. I learned that she had a degree from the University of Texas and worked as a teacher. Her late husband, Eric, had been an army captain before he was killed in action. She told me she never thought she'd be able to love again after losing him. I understood that feeling all too well. It's how I felt after the death of my marriage. Laura excused herself to go to the ladies' room. I couldn't help but watch her as she made her way through the crowd. Several guys tried to buy her a drink or strike up a conversation, but she brushed them off without even a smile. I liked seeing that. It told me a lot about the kind of woman she was. When she came back, I leaned in and said, "I'm really glad you flagged me down today. Meeting you is the best thing that's happened to me in a long time." "I know we just met," she replied, "but being with you feels right. It's like our souls recognize each other." "I feel the same way, Laura," I said. "But I get the sense you have something you need to tell me." "You're right," she said, looking serious. "If a man wants to be in my life, he has to accept two things. First, Emma is my whole world. We're a package deal. And second, the love I had for Eric is still with me. It's a part of who I am and always will be, even though he's gone. Can you handle that? Are you strong enough to share me with his memory?" I looked down for a moment, taking it in, then raised my eyes back to hers and took her hands in mine. "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "I'd never want to take that love away from you. If anything, I've always dreamed of being with a woman who could love so deeply. I respect what you're saying, and I know he must have been a great man. I just hope there's room left in your heart for me. If I were in his shoes, I'd want you to find happiness again." "I think there is, James," she said, her voice soft and hopeful. "The love I have for Eric will always be special, tucked away in its own place in my heart. But I believe my heart is big enough to hold more love." When we got back to her place, we stood at the front door, and I turned to face her, looking deep into her eyes. "Can I have a hug?" I asked, opening my arms. She stepped into my embrace, and I held her tight. I kissed her gently, over and over, losing myself in her scent. I didn't want to let go. I cupped her face in my hands and whispered, "You're really special, Laura. I just needed you to know that." We kissed again, this time more deeply, with a passion I hadn't felt in years. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying in bed, I replayed the day's events in my mind, thinking about Laura. I realized then that I wasn't homeless anymore. Being with Laura felt like home. Without a word, she slipped into the room and quietly got into bed beside me. She snuggled up close, and just as I started to speak, she pressed her finger to my lips. I couldn't help myself. I began kissing her neck, my desire surging as I pulled her closer. I fought the urge to rush things. I wanted to make sure this night was unforgettable for her. We spent the entire night together, our souls connecting in a way I hadn't thought possible. 9 weeks went by in a blur. Michael's trial for assault and resisting arrest was fast approaching. If he managed to post bail, he'd be back in their lives. Laura didn't talk much about her fears, but I could tell they were there, lingering in the background. Every night, we shared a bed, finding comfort and intimacy together. Her gentle, nurturing nature brought out a side of me I hadn't seen in a long time, the part one actually liked. It felt like our needs fit together perfectly. She wanted a protector, a provider, and a lover. And I needed someone worth protecting, someone I could love, and a reason to build a future again. My memories of Rachel began to fade, like an old dream slipping away. I found myself able to think of her without any emotion. In fact, I could even wish her well, hoping she found her own path to happiness. Every morning, Laura would slip out of bed early, making sure not to set a bad example for Emma. "So, when are you going to pop the question?" Betty asked me one morning as I sat drinking my coffee. "What?" I blurted out, spilling a little coffee on the table. "If I've ever seen two people meant to be together, it's you and Laura. And Emma absolutely adores you," Betty said, turning to face me while she washed the dishes. "You do realize she loves you, don't you?" "I never thought I'd see her so happy again." "I know," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I love her too. And Emma. And you, Betty." "This place feels like home to me," I said, walking over to give her a big hug. "But we haven't known each other that long. I don't want to rush things. Maybe I should tell her how I feel first. What do you think?" "I don't want to interfere," she said with a gentle smile, giving my shoulder a pat before leaving the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That night, as I waited for Laura in my room, I made up my mind. I was going to talk to her about marriage. I knew she was the right woman for me. It was important that she understood what this commitment meant to me. I wanted us to make promises to each other before taking any vows in front of others. I decided I wouldn't hold back like I did in my first marriage. Suddenly, I heard a sharp scream. It was Laura. In an instant, I knew Michael was in the house. I reached into the drawer by my bed and grabbed the 9mm Glock I'd purchased after meeting the residency requirements. I wasn't about to face him empty-handed. Wearing nothing but my underwear, I rushed to Laura's room. When I got there, I saw Michael on top of her, trying to assault her. She was fighting him off, calling out my name. I pressed the gun to the back of his head. "Get up, you bastard. Real slow. If you move the wrong way, I'll blow your brains out. In fact, I just might do it anyway." Michael slowly got to his feet, and his pants fell to the floor. He tried to pull them back up. "Leave them down. Move again, and I'll kill you," I warned him. "Laura, call the police. Tell them Michael broke into your house and tried to assault you. Keep Emma and Betty in their rooms." I dragged Michael to the front door, his pants making it difficult for him to walk. When we got there, I forced him down on his knees. "Are you ready to die, Michael? You picked the wrong family and the wrong man to mess with. You're going to pay for what you did." "Who are you?" he croaked, sounding scared. "I'm a knight in shining armor," I said coldly. I cocked the gun, pressing it harder against his head. "Say your prayers, scumbag. You're about to meet your maker." I dropped the hammer on an empty chamber. He flinched and wet himself. I had taken out the magazine. There wasn't a bullet in the gun. "If you ever come near Laura or her family again, the gun will be loaded next time," I said. The police arrived and hauled him away. As a repeat offender, he was looking at least 10 years behind bars, with a guy named Bubba as his cellmate. I doubted Michael ever wanted to cross paths with me again. Once the police left, I stood by the door in my boxers, still holding the gun. Laura, Emma, and Betty came rushing toward me, all talking at once. Emma wrapped her little arms around my legs while Laura and Betty hugged me tightly. "Okay, everyone," I said, trying to calm them down. He's gone, and he's not coming back. We're safe now. I promise I'll keep it that way. 3 months later, Laura and I were married. Exactly a year after that, our son, Eric, was born. He looks just like me. Emma was over the moon to have a baby brother. I asked Sam to be Eric's godfather, and he was honored. He's become a part of our family now. Laura went back to teaching, and Betty takes care of the kids. We bought a new house, and I opened a McDonald's franchise. I legally adopted Emma, and she's my little riding buddy now. The girl's got motorcycles in her blood. Life has its ups and downs, but I've learned that when you're stuck on a bad road, the best thing you can do is find a new one. I'm happy. Truly happy. Thanks for sticking with me until the end of this wild journey from heartbreak to healing. If you were in my shoes, would you choose revenge or forgiveness? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more stories like this one.